Welcome everyone, and thanks for joining us today for this edition of the SmartConnect for Dynamics GP demonstration. I'm Jack of all trades, Rod O'Connor, and today I'll be your guide through some of the key features of SmartConnect. I want to start by saying that SmartConnect is a platform on which you can build integrations. Now that's actually a more important sentence for you than it sounds, and I said it for a couple of different reasons. So the first is that every business, including your own, is at least a little bit unique, and that means that no two businesses are going to have the exact same integration needs, even if you're in the exact same industry in the exact same region. So SmartConnect, being a platform, allows you to build these custom integrations that are unique to your own business needs and your own requirements. The second reason that that sentence was important is that it didn't include the word Dynamics GP. So although I'll be focusing on GP integrations during this demo, because, let's face it, that's what brought you in the door, SmartConnect can actually handle all of your integration requirements, even the ones that have nothing to do with Dynamics GP. So I'm going to keep pointing this out throughout the rest of the presentation, so you don't need to write it down, but just be aware that, although we're very focused on GP here today, you can actually look at the rest of your business as a potential SmartConnect fit. Now, another thing I want to say about SmartConnect is that it's been designed as a no to low code platform. There's a lot of, marketing hoopla over that lately, but it really was designed from the start to put the power of integration into end user hands. Okay, so what that means is you don't always need a consultant or an IT person to build out your integrations. I've trained plenty of accountants over the years to build some really cool integrations that have completely streamlined their jobs, and they never had to reach out to a consultant or to an IT person. Now, from an agenda perspective, I know I got a little bit backwards there because I talked about the product before I got to the agenda, but from an agenda perspective, we've got one more quick slide to get through. I called it SmartConnect in a nutshell. Then we're going to actually jump into the demo. We're going to see the product in action. We're going to come back to the PowerPoint. We're going to talk about some resources, and then we can move on to questions and answers. This is our favorite SmartConnect infographic here at E1, as it really displays the power of the product. Basically, it says we can take the data from any source and move it to any destination and transform that data the way we want as it's moving between the source and the destination. And the best part is we can often do this without writing a single line of code. Let's start at the top and look at our sources. It could be anything. Obviously we've got GP up here at the top, but we've got a lot of other standard connectors for things that a lot of people talk to. Things like Microsoft's Dynamics 365 CRM or CE or whatever you want to call that. We've got, most of the Microsoft stack. We've got the Business Centrals as well, obviously. We've also got a couple of what I would call rather important ones for you out of the box. Web services is, to my mind, one of the most important. So as you start to move your business out into the internet, and it is happening everywhere, we've got you covered. So we have a standard REST service connector, which means that, your online HR system, your online payroll, your online warehouse or fleet management, all of those can be integrated to Dynamics GP using our REST connector. Okay, so just because you don't see something on the list here doesn't mean that it can't be done. A couple of other important ones for you guys. We've got ODBC and we've got SQL Server in there. Those are what's allowing us to connect to all of your on-premise data as well. Okay, so lots and lots and lots of different sources of data. Obviously, we can do files as well in there. It's worth noting in there. And not just your standard TXT and CSV and Excel. We can do your XMLs. We can do your JSONs. We can go all the way back to pipe delimited if you want. So if you do have data in a file, we can do that. Now, if you take a look at our destinations down here on the bottom, you'll see that, again, it's pretty much the same list. So what we often like to say is you could literally draw a line from any of your data sources up here down to any of these connectors down here, and then draw that line all the way back up to any other connector up here. So you can really start to mix and match where you're moving your data from and where you're moving it to. Okay, so again, that kind of goes back to that exactly goes back to that point I made earlier where I said we're not just a GP platform. We grew up with GP, we love GP, but we're involved in many, 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 many integrations out there that don't involve GP at all. Okay, now the second layer talks about triggers, and that's basically how do I call a SmartConnect process. So I can do it with things like Dynamics GP and SQL Server, CRM, Salesforce, I can build real-time integrations. So what does that mean? I can save my customer and I can have that customer automatically update the account record in Salesforce. Similarly, I could do change tracked. So, with change tracked, I can, again, notify SmartConnect that this change was made, but then group up or batch up all of my changes. So maybe my customers don't need to go to Salesforce right away, because probably in the next half hour, I'm not going to specifically do anything with them in Salesforce. So I can just batch up that change, and every half hour, just update all the customers who have been changed in that past half hour. Okay. We have a couple different ways we can kick off a manual process, and I will show you that throughout the demo. And then we've got a couple of other things. Scheduled is a big one that I just mentioned that we would use with a change track usually. And we do have a web service, which we won't be getting into today, but for anybody who is on the call, who's maybe a little bit codey, you can call SmartConnect processes from your own web application if you wanted to. Okay, and transformations, I'm not going to dig too deeply into these because I like to show them while we're actually in product. But suffice it to say that anything that you need to do to make your source match your destination, I haven't come across a situation I couldn't do that. Okay, and again, we'll dig into a lot of these things in the transformation layer once we get there. All right, so I'm going to jump over to my demo now. Okay, so what we're going to do, I'm going to start out by just creating some data. Okay, so what do I want to call this? Let's call this GP demo. Well, maybe I should click in there so it gets my keyboard. GP demo for today. Okay, so this is our GP demo for today customer, and I'm going to go ahead and click on submit. Now, as I said, what I'm doing here is replicating a source of data. For you, this could be an Excel workbook. This could be, as I mentioned, an external application such as a warehouse management solution or a fleet management, whether it's online or on premise. This could be, an online store. We have a lot of customers with WooCommerce or Magento or any of the others, Shopify, all of those other e-commerce solutions that everybody's using online today. We can use all of those as a data source. In my particular situation, I've got a SQL Server table sitting in the background, and I have a real-time trigger on it. And what that trigger is doing, there's actually a lot of stuff it's doing. We're going to take a look at part of that today. We're going to take a look at the customer and the invoice that I just created inside of Dynamics GP. But at the same time, I'm creating an account and a contact and assigning the contact to the account in Dynamics CRM. I'm doing that same thing inside of Salesforce. I'm importing transactions into Business Central. I'm importing a customer and an invoice into NetSuite. And I'm also creating a ticket and an organization and a contact and associating those all together inside of an online solution called Zendesk. Now, I'm not telling you all of that to brag to you. I'm telling you because that one simple source of data turned into an integration that went across my entire organization. Okay, so again, you're here thinking about your specific Dynamics GP import needs. My job is to tell you that we can do a whole lot more than that. Now, let's go and take a look at that data inside of Dynamics GP. Let's go and take a look at our SmartView. And let's take a look at today's sales. Okay, so you can see here I have my GP demo for today invoice got created. I can quickly pop over and take a look at customer maintenance. Now, for those of you who might be a little bit curious, this product right here is called SmartView. It's honestly, it's basically Smart List on steroids. We've got a lot of cool other features in here that I'm not going to delve into, but it is an E1 Solutions product. So if you'd like to see a demo of that at some point, we have that out there as well. So you can go find that video or reach out to our sales team. But where I'm going here is my customer maintenance. And I like to point out a couple of things while we're here. You guys saw me, I only entered a first name and a last name. Now, things like an address ID and populating these fields over here, I've got a little comment in here. I've figured out what is the price level for this customer. These are all transformations, those transformations I talked about on that infographic that I showed you earlier. So these are all different things that we can make happen on the way in. The reason that's important is my data wasn't sufficient to meet all of my business needs. So in order to do that, I needed to build some rules into SmartConnect. And so we can do that to meet your custom business needs as well. All right. Further to that, if I pop back to my extender here, further to that, if I open up the invoice, you can see here I figured out an item number on the way in. I figured out a unit price on the way in, and all I got from that website was a customer name and address. I've created a customer number. I didn't talk about that earlier. Okay. I've even assigned it to a batch. So all of this was able to be done through the SmartConnect process on the way in. Okay. And as I mentioned before, I took that same pieces of data and I wrote that to Salesforce and CRM and a bunch of other stuff. Okay. One last thing I want to show you. I told you there's a couple ways that we could trigger SmartConnect processes, and one of those was manual. Now there's two different types of manual. I'm going to show you one when we get into the actual product, but from an end user standpoint, I want you to take a look at this one as well. Looks like I still have some old data on this. I should have refreshed it, but you can see here I'm pulling that invoice that we just created. Okay. Now here's where some people who watch my demos get a little bit too literal. I'm showing you something just to fit into the story that we have as part of our demo process. So those invoices we just created, I'm pulling them out and I want to make some changes. Now for you guys, this might be month-end journal entries. Every accountant out there and every business has some funky workbook where they build up their month-end entries and then they retype those entries into their ERP. You guys could become a hero to your end users, to those accountants, by allowing them to have a button here in Excel that allows them to import that data. So I'm going to quickly change this, okay, to $150 just because why not? Okay. The important part is not the layout of this Excel workbook. It's not the transaction that's being written to. The important part is this E1 Solutions tab right here. Now we've got a one-time setup right here where you're going to enter in your SmartConnect login information, and then you're going to select the SmartConnect process. So whoever sets up the workbook the first time, they're going to populate this tab. Okay. Once that's done, everyone else who uses this workbook will create their data. So their journal entry, their list of payable transactions, their contacts they just got from a trade show that they want to import to CRM, the inventory count that they want to send to their warehouse management solution, all of those things. They're going to click on Run Map. Okay, now Run Map is going to take the data from this workbook and push it into SmartConnect and run the map that we set up on the service settings. Now you can see here I got a green success. Everything is good, hunky-dory. Had there been a problem, it actually would have come back as red. It would have said error and would have told me what the errors were, and it would have actually popped up a window allowing me to change my data and retry it. Okay, so if the period was closed or the customer was on hold or the GL account didn't allow direct posting or any other thing that stops you from being able to create this transaction in your destination, it's going to stop you. Okay, and it's going to give you that error and tell you what it was. Now, if we take a quick look here, I'm just going to quickly refresh this list just to show you that our amount now is $150, just like I just changed it in that workbook. So we did in fact successfully update our invoice here inside of Business Central, inside of Dynamics GP. All right. So with that, let's take a quick look at SmartConnect itself. Now, everything in SmartConnect starts with connections. Okay. I talked about connections at length when we looked at that infographic, but I'll take a quick look here just to show you. I can create connections to all of those things that I mentioned before. These ones you see here, the Shopify, the WooCommerce, this REST one, these are all REST adapters that we've set up for you. So you can actually download some of those from our website. So not every REST connection that you run into out there needs to be configured by you. We've done as much as we can to make this as easy as possible on you guys. Now, when it comes to setting up a connection, oops, let me get out of here. I'll show you my Dynamics GP connector here. It's really just about telling us how do we log into whatever it is you're logging into. So in the case of GP, what SQL server is it on? What do you call your Dynamics database or your system database? What credentials should I use to log in? Okay, and we do install some stuff on your GP server, which is it's going to be important when I talk about data sources in just a few minutes. Okay, so honestly, everything you connect to will look similar to this. It'll be, where is it? Where's the thing I'm logging into? And what credentials do I use to log into it? Okay, the next thing we talk about is data sources. Now, data sources, I mean, all of those connections that we talked about on the last little bit, all of those can be used as a data source. Okay, so I'm going to go through a create here, and I'm going to just show you creating a new data source. I mentioned earlier we can do file data sources. We can also use folders. Okay, so what that means is if you have a folder out there on your network and everybody drops their month-end journal entry files into that folder, you can have SmartConnect watch that folder and process any files that are dropped into that folder. Okay, now we talked before about real time and change. So real time is as soon as somebody clicks on save, whatever changes were made get sent to whatever my destination is. Okay, change was as soon as I click on save, I notify SmartConnect that this change was made, but we gather up all of our changes over a span of time and process them all at once. Everything else that's not a file, a change, or a real time is a bulk trigger. Okay, or a bulk query. And all that means is it just gets run when the process runs. Now, again, anything can be used as a data source. Okay, you can see lots of choices here. This is a GP demo though, so I'm going to start with a GP query. Okay, so I'm going to give this a name. And I'm going to choose which GP instance or which GP tenant. So if you guys do have multiple tenants of GP out there, we can connect to those multiple tenants. Okay. And then I choose which company this data source is coming from. Okay. So I'm going to choose Fabricam for mine. Now I've got a couple choices here. If I'm somebody who knows SQL, or maybe I've downloaded a query from Victoria Uden's website, I've built something in my SQL Server Management Studio, I can click on that Edit SQL here and I can type it in. Okay, so if I know my tables, if I know my query, I can go ahead and drop that in a SQL. Now, a lot of people don't. Now, that means I could use, for example, the modify button. Okay, and the important thing here, if you guys remember, I mentioned earlier, when you install the GP connector, we're going to install some stuff on your GP server. And that's what that's for this. Okay, so we took a look at your GP, we took a look at everything that's in your GP and said, okay, what are all the tables, what are all the columns in those tables in your GP? And that includes your ISV solutions and custom chunk files, okay, or custom dictionaries. So now you don't need to know that RM00101 is your customer master. You can scroll down this list until you find the RM customer master table. Okay. Whoops, I think I scrolled back up too far. Here we go, RM customer master. And now I can just put that out there in my query, and all of my columns make sense. They're all plain English, right? So the primary bill to address code, I don't have to know that that's PRBTADCD in the database. I can just find it in the list, and I can just check my boxes. Okay, I can have other tables here too. So if I wanted to build out a query, now anyone on the call who actually knows these tables, you should know that this is not a valid query that I'm building. I'm just making examples here. I can join stuff by dragging and dropping. As I said, we've tried to make this as easy on you guys as possible. Okay, now if you want to know what that SQL Server query looks like, you can take a look at it here, and you can even see what data, if any, is going to be returned by that query. Okay, once I say OK, now I've got my data source all set up. I can validate it. I can preview it. Okay, and most importantly, once I save it, I can use it in integrations. Okay, and I say integrations, I'm not going to save that because it's not a good one. I say integrations because one data source could be used across multiple processes. I'm going to talk later about a water heater example, and it's going to use 3 processes, and they all had the same data source. So now I create one data source and use it 3 times. All right, so I've established my connection. I've built my data source. The next thing I need to do is build my integration. So I'm going to go to the integration that actually just created my GP sales invoice. Now, it doesn't matter what my source is. It doesn't matter what my destination is. The anatomy of a process will always look the same. Whether GP is involved or not, this screen will look pretty much the same. Okay, so the first thing we do is choose which of our data sources. So obviously, again, we're going to choose what type of data source it is. Then we're going to choose which specific data source within that category. Okay, and we can even preview that data if there is any to be previewed. Now, once I've chosen that data source, now's the time to choose my destination. Now, I told you I'm going to keep harping on this, so I'm going to show you again. We can use pretty much anything as a destination. Okay, so hopefully what you're getting from this is these integrations, unlike other GP related integration tools, are not just into Dynamics GP. They can be into GP, they can be out of GP to somewhere else. They can not involve GP at all. We have ultimate flexibility here with these tools. So like I said, hopefully you're seeing that with this list of destinations. However, we're all here to see GP as a destination, so I'm going to speak to that. Now, when we talk to GP in particular, we're using something Microsoft created called eConnect in order to talk to GP. And that's what gives us all that business logic. So all those rules I talked about earlier, you know, the valid GL accounts, customers who are active, is the period open or closed, all of that is coming from eConnect. And that was actually where SmartConnect started, was as an interface to this eConnect, which is very, very much a programmer's tool. And we tried to put it in the hands of the consultants and the end users and stuff like that. So when you come in and choose GP as your destination, you have to choose which module. So we grouped up all of those eConnect nodes, and we said group them by module first. And you can see here, there's quite a few of them covered. Once I've chosen my module or my group, I have to choose what type of thing I want to do within that group. And it's not always just about creating or updating transactions, okay, or creating or updating master records. You know, in this case, I could be voiding these sales orders. I could be dealing with process holds. Lots of different things I could be doing in here. Now, this demo, obviously, I am updating or creating a sales order. Another thing to mention while we're in here, well, 2 things in this upper part. First thing is, E1 has another product called Extender, which some of you may own, which allows you to add as many custom fields to any window in Dynamics GP, as well as add any business logic that you might need to add. All of that is available through Extender. Now, SmartConnect has been designed to talk to Extender really, really well. Obviously, they're both our products. We make them both work together. Okay, so Extender becomes just another node that you can talk to. The other thing to talk about here is some of you will have multiple companies within your Dynamics GP. Very, very common. Quite often, you're going to need to build integrations to those multiple companies in different ways. For example, if I was importing a chart of accounts from an Excel workbook, I'd probably want to hit all of my companies at the same time. Right? So I've got one Excel workbook, I press on upload, and boom, it hits all of my company databases together. Or I might be in a situation, which happens a lot when we're dealing with an ERP and CRM integration, or even an online store and ERP integration. And what happens there is, I'll choose CRM as my example. In CRM, I've got a sales team and they operate as one organization. Within that organization, they might be different legal entities, but we are sales and we work together globally in this one CRM instance. Now, you get to the ERP, GP in our example, and we've got accountants, and accountants do what accountants do, and for various reasons, they need to break that up into various company databases. So using this screen here, and by the way, this is the first time I've mentioned code to you guys today. Not the last, but it is the third last time. What I can do here is I can use some logic and say, if this territory is Canada, then send this to my Canadian company, or whatever that logic is for you guys. I can flesh out that logic using code, and I can say record by record, this order has to go to my US company, this order has to go to my UK company, this order has to go to Canada, or Jim's company and my plumbing company and my electric company, whatever they are. So you can use that so that one integration can hit record by record multiple company databases. And that's really important differentiator for us, again, from the other tools that are writing records into GP out there. Okay, so with the multi-company out of the way, now that we've chosen our node and our group and our node types, now we've got this list of nodes down here. And again, we've grouped them in a way that we thought makes sense. If I'm creating a sales order, what else might I be doing at the same time? So you could be creating or updating the item or the customer or the address. The customer is a really common one, especially in an online store situation where, very often this customer came in off the internet. They're placing their first order with us. They don't exist, but we've already taken their money. So now we have to create the customer, then create the order, then create the payment against the order. We can do all that. Okay, I'm going to drill in on add line item. Now again, this window is always going to look the same regardless of what is your source and what is your destination. Over here on the left, we're always going to have our source columns. Over here on the right, we'll always have our target columns. Now, when it's a target, we know, like GP, there's a couple of cool features. First of all, these red columns, they're the required columns. I have to fill in, at a bare minimum, I have to fill in these fields. It doesn't say what I have to fill them in with, obviously, but I have to fill them in. Other cool things, especially in GP world, I don't know how much you guys know about the back end of GP, but a sales document type is actually represented by a number in the back end, not by a word. So invoice, for example, I believe is number 3. So you don't have to go out to Victoria Uden's website to figure out what is the word invoice as a number. Here we've given you the list of words and you can just choose it from your dropdown. So again, trying to make it wicked easy for anybody who's coming in here and trying to build an integration. Now to do a mapping, pretty straightforward. I can choose event level here, for example, drag it over here to the left and drop it into the comment ID. Not what my coworkers are going to want me to leave here permanently, so I can just drop it down and I can delete that. And hopefully you noticed when I dropped it down, I could map it this way too. So I don't have to drag and drop if I'm someone who doesn't like to. I could just drop down this list and choose from there. Again, just trying to make it easy. Now, I told you earlier when we talked about transformations, I don't like to talk about it on the infographic. I like to get into a little detail here. So what we mean by the transformations is it's pretty rare for a source and a destination to match. I mean, GP is a 30-year-old accounting system. It's got some quirks left over from the old days or that it's developed over the years. Okay, so sometimes you have to massage data to get it into GP. For example, we have this date column type field here. What that allows you to do is, without code, transform your source date format into a format applicable to your destination. Why that's important for GP? GP date fields don't allow to have any time component to the date. It'll blow up if you try to import any time component on your date, whereas almost every other date format on the planet includes a time component. Okay, so I can use my date column and say on the top, my date looks like this in my source, and in my destination, I need to strip off the date. And so that's another drop-down field. So that's one of our no-code solutions. We can also do things like have a GP rolling column. What that is get you the next number in a transaction. Okay, so for example, I've got one here. All I have to do is choose which module is this coming from, which company is this coming from, so what is my next number, what type of document is it, okay, and what document ID if that's applicable. So to purchase orders, this doesn't apply, but obviously to sales orders, it does. So all I had to do there was make choices, and now my numbering system fits in as if I created those transactions through the front end. Okay, a couple others here. I've got a SQL lookup that would allow me to, my favorite example of this is I get a price sheet from my vendor. I have to import that to GP. They're going to give me their UPC. They're not going to give me my item number, and I need my item number because that's a key field. So rather than have the users go through and do some funky VLOOKUP to get me the item number, I can actually use a SQL lookup on the way in. So basically exclude the user from that process, and I can look up the item number based on the UPC that was passed in. And again, that's a no-code solution. I'm making choices in the window. I do have calculated fields. This is the second time, again, not the last time, but the second time I'm mentioning code to you guys. And in here you have all the power of VB.NET or C# for the accountants on the call or the non-code people on the call. Don't worry about it. Again, I've had plenty of integrations out there that have been perfectly fine with no code. Both of those languages I just mentioned are very, very, very highly Googleable. So, you can usually, even if you need simple code, get away with writing it yourself. But you could throw an apple out your window and hit somebody who knows how to write either VB.NET or C#. So you should be okay there too. All right, we do give you as many helper functions as you can. We give you all of your source columns. You build out your script, and quite often we're doing things like concatenating a first name, last name into a customer name. We're figuring out a gross margin, stuff like that. Okay. As far as additional columns go, there's many, many more. Again, if I was writing into something like CRM, I've got something called an entity lookup, which is very important when I'm writing into that system, as well as Salesforce. So some of our additional columns are destination specific, whereas others fit in all the time. But the key thing to take away from that, flexibility and ease of use. Okay, so I can very quickly transform my data, often without the use of any code, and I can make it fit into my destination system. All right, let me get out of there. So that's basically everything about mapping. I mean, I teach a boot camp on this, and it's a 2 full days or 16 full hours of training that I give you on SmartConnect. And we've got about, 20 minutes left in this here demo. So I'm not going to obviously be able to cover every element, but we can certainly cover your questions towards the end. All right, next thing I like to talk about while we're in a SmartConnect process is this concept of tasks. You can see that we've got tasks that can be run before a map, while a map is running, before a document, or after each document. Now, a document is just a record. So one invoice, or one customer, or one employee, or one contact into my MailChimp, whatever that record is. We call it a document. So after that succeeds or fails, we can run some tasks. We can run tasks when the overall integration either succeeds or fails. Okay, so again, lots of flexibility here. Now, what can we do with these? What are the types of tasks we can do? You can see here we've got some, I call them boring ones. We can move files around, which is fine. The real meat for me is kind of down in this area. So the first one I like to talk about, third and final time I'm mentioning code to you guys, we can run a script. So again, my favorite example is SAP Concur, where we often have to pull down a file that got created in the FTP site, and then we have to decrypt it. So rather than ask a user to do that manually, we'll create a script. Sorry, I'm highlighting the wrong thing. We'll create a script and we'll run that before the integration. So as an integration pre-task that downloads the file and decrypts it programmatically. So now I've got something I can schedule, and I don't have to put anybody's finger on the keyboard at all. I could run another integration. So I told you guys earlier, I was going to be giving you this water heater example example. So I have this customer, they install water heaters at houses. When they do that, they don't actually sell it to you, they rent it to you. So they needed to deplete inventory by one water heater, increase fixed assets by that same water heater, and then they needed to create a field service equipment record so that they could track the PM. So what we did from the first map that depleted the inventory, we used a run integration to call the second and third. So that took care of the timing. So everything was always in sync from a timing perspective. But what it also allowed us to do was take the cost of the inventory we just depleted and pass it in as a parameter to the fixed asset we were about to create. So now I'm passing information between maps so that everything is as accurate as it can be. I've also got SQL commands here. My favorite example from a GP standpoint is not too long ago, I had a customer importing sales transactions, which included returns. Now in their GP, they were using the site segment override, which basically overrides one segment of your GL account based on what warehouse that appeared in or that transaction happened in. It doesn't apply to sales returns. Don't know why. So we used a SQL command to basically mimic the site segment override. And after the document succeeded, we had a SQL script that went in and changed the GL account on that distribution line. Lots of other stuff you can do there, but that's just kind of a fun example that I have. The last one I like to talk about and actually open up is this sending an email. The reason I open it is not just so I have something to do, it's to show you it's because it dovetails into error mitigation as well. Okay, so not only is this a task we can do, but it allows us to capture the errors and send them to users. So for example, I can pull up my map ID. Oops, I'm not sure why it jumped over to there. I apologize. Okay, and I can type in, there's a problem with that map ID, and now I can start to flesh out an email to my users. I can put in, when did the map start? How many records were there? How many of those records failed? And probably the most important is going to be this run errors guy right here. Now that's going to be that list of errors we talked about earlier, the GL accounts that are disabled, the customers who don't exist, all of those error messages. Doesn't matter what my destination is. All of those error messages are going to be included now in this email. So effectively what we're doing there is poking our users in the belly button without anybody having to check any logs. As soon as an error happened, I sent it out to the end users. Now, these emails don't have to be negative. I, as an integration developer, have to think about error mitigation. Internally here at E1, we use this email in a positive way. So you guys are going to go away from this demo. You're going to do whatever other research you have to do. You're going to be very excited, and then you're going to come and make a purchase on our web store. When that happens, the salesperson responsible for you and your account is going to get an email to say that you've made that purchase. And now they can work with you to make sure you've got the training you need, that you've got, all the resources, you're aware of what's available to you. They can work with you to make sure that you have the most positive experience you could possibly have with an integration implementation. Okay, the last thing I like to talk about while we're in here is scheduling. Okay, and again, this isn't because scheduling is magical within SmartConnect. It's as flexible as any other scheduling tool you've dealt with. Okay, so we can choose what is my frequency with this particular process. If it's weekly, I can tell it to run on which days of the week. So maybe my third-party logistics provider will only send me a file 3 days a week. So I can do that. I can start it at a particular time of day. So maybe before people come into the office, and I can repeat it. Maybe on that day, they're going to send me 3 files, right? And they're going to send them about 2 hours apart. Okay, so not every 3 minutes. I want to do this every 120 minutes. I'm going to finish it just after people go home. Okay, so this schedule now, or this process, will run every Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, starting at 7 a.m. every 2 hours until 9 p.m. Okay, so again, ultimate flexibility with when these processes get run if you choose to schedule them. All right, so I promised you I was going to be showing you the big rocks within SmartConnect, okay, or the main things that I wanted to show you, and I've done it. So hopefully I've covered enough for you to see just how flexible and just how simple it can be to set up a process within SmartConnect. So let's jump back to our PowerPoint presentation real quick, just one or two more slides, and then we'll open it up for questions. So the next slide that we want to talk about is resources. So what's available to you as a SmartConnect user? So the first thing is templates. We've been working with GP for 20 years now. We know it very, very well. And we do have some out-of-the-box templates. Now, these aren't final situation or final solutions for you. I started out this whole thing by saying every business is unique and there's no one solution that fits everybody. Well, that applies here too. But we have given you some starting points so that you're not always starting from zero, depending what it is you're trying to integrate with. We do have a professional services team here that's outside of our support team. Professional services can help you design integrations, build integrations, whatever. We can even provide you training if you like, that's been personalized for you. We do have support. Depending on which subscription level you go with, you may have access to unlimited support. Even if you don't have unlimited support, you do have the ability to purchase support in 2-hour increments. Okay, we do have a few training options available to you. We do have private online training, which is pretty common. So this is where you guys, you would tell us specifically what types of things you're trying to learn, and we would then help you build out that training plan and then train you. We can also do in-person training. Now, this is obviously going to depend on where you are and what your regulations are and where the trainer's coming from, at least for the next little bit. But if available, we can offer in-person training. Now, throughout the year, we do also attend a lot of live events, and quite often we'll do boot camps around those. So feel free to check out our events page and figure out what we have going on there from a training perspective as well. And what I just said was really more applicable to boot camp, which is the next thing I was going to talk about. And that's where we do, I mentioned earlier, the 2-day boot camp or 16 hours. We offer that both virtually and around those events that I talked about. If it's online, it's 4 half days. If it's in person around one of those events, it's going to be a 2-day in a room. And that's where we start from 0 and get you to 100 in 16 hours. All right, so that brings us to the end of the presentation. As I mentioned, I've covered a lot in this 45 minutes or so that we've been here. If you would like more information or if you have any questions, there's a few different things you can do. You can hit up our website, e1solutions.com or smartconnect.com. They go to the same place. You're going to find a ton more information there if you have specific questions you'd like to dig into. You can follow us on Twitter at e1solutions, or if you want to actually chit-chat with someone, you can either give that phone number a call or reach out to sales@e1solutions.com by email. And whoever's responsible for your area will definitely reach back to you and answer whatever questions we can. All right. Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much, everyone. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.